You know the true story of Five Nights at Freddy's? Have you figured out the lore that countless millions have been trying to figure out for years? The answer is probably no, unless your name is Scott Cawthon, that is. But many people have tried. And as the games have been released and new information has come to light, the FNAF community's theories have changed radically. In this video, we're going to talk about how radically our perception of the lore has changed these past 4 years. When FNAF was first released exactly 4 years ago, everyone knew that there was more to this game than meets the eye. Hidden lore tidbits found by fans, and the phenomenon that was referred to in the game's files as Yellow Bear, and by fans as Golden Freddy, proved that a deep story was hidden by the game's developer. Fans were able to figure out that the aggressive behavior of the animatronics were in fact linked to a missing children's incident, which involved a killer dressing up as a company mascot, luring and then murdering a total of 5 children. The souls of the children fused to the suits that they were stuffed in, presumably by the killer. But fans couldn't figure out why the night guard kept going to work day after day in spite of the danger. MatPat from Game Theory came up with the theory that the main character, Mike Schmidt, was in fact the killer, and he was stuck having nightmares which manifested themselves as never-ending night shifts at the pizzeria. If the player went to the custom night screen and input 1987 in the difficulty slot for each character, Golden Freddy would appear and crash the game. What did this mean? No one seemed to know for sure, but fans speculated that either Golden Freddy caused the bite, or that it was possessed by the victim of the bite. Later, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 came out, a game that, to this day, no one has fully figured out. For starters, fans at the time couldn't figure out if FNAF 2 was a prequel or a sequel. When the player dies, there's a small chance that they will be able to play a death minigame showing the children being killed. The killer had different sprites in different minigames, leading some to believe that there were multiple killers. Some still believe this to this day. Fans also couldn't figure out the identity of the victim of the bite of 87, an incident mentioned by a security guard named Phone Guy in the first game. A YouTuber named Creep McPasta theorized that the protagonist that we play as, Jeremy Fitzgerald, as seen from his paycheck, was the victim of the bite. There was also the question of who performed the bite. Some speculated that, judging by the character's jump scares, either Foxy or Mangle were the ones who did the deed. Though, personally, I always believed that Toy Chica was also a contender due to how she takes her beak off and lunges at you. The killer displayed in one of the minigames had something in his hand. Fans couldn't figure out what that object was. Some speculated that it was a weapon, and others speculated that perhaps it was a phone. Sometimes, a character who resembled Balloon Boy would appear under your desk. The game's files refer to this character as JJ, but the book, The Freddy Files, refers to this character as Balloon Girl. To this day, fans can't quite understand the importance of this character, if the character has any importance at all. Some fans have dismissed Balloon Girl as a hallucination. Rarely, 2 shadowy figures that fans named Shadow Bonnie and Shadow Freddy would appear. Fans couldn't figure out their place in the story either. While many tried their hand at figuring out FNAF 2, MatPat eventually came out with a theory that seemed to piece most of the story together. But not all of the story. What was the significance of Balloon Girl? Who were the shadow animatronics? Was the phone guy really the killer, as MatPat theorized? A YouTuber named Pretty Grumpy Bear made a video speculating that the phone guy was in fact not the killer. Was Jeremy Fitzgerald really the bite victim? Who performed the bite of 87? Why is there a bear endoskeleton wandering around the facility? Why does the paper plate from Party Room 4 randomly move to your office? We couldn't be sure of any of these, and to this day, we don't fully and definitively have the answers to all these questions. Later on, Scott released a trailer for FNAF 3, and fans immediately began to theorize what would take place in this game. The game eventually released and at first seemed fairly straightforward. The villain of the previous game is discovered to have destroyed the original 4 animatronics, but is later himself trapped within an animatronic suit. 30 years later, he is discovered by workers from Fazbear's Fright, an attraction from a local amusement park. After roaming for a few nights, someone burns the place down on the final night, but Springtrap, the killer, is revealed to have survived. MatPat made another video that covered the lore quite well and even managed to give great explanations for questions we still had from FNAF 2, such as who the shadow animatronics were. But there are still secrets that to this day fans don't understand. There are many games within FNAF 3 that are hidden and needed for the good ending. The player must break and glitch the games in order to find and give cake to dead children hidden within the minigames. But the imagery in these minigames is strange and likely means something. Theorists struggle to answer the mystery of these minigames so much that they avoided addressing it entirely. MatPat's 3-part video on FNAF 3 still stuck to the idea that the killer was Phone Guy, which a number of fans disagreed with. A channel named 8-Bit Gaming actually made a video explaining why, to them, the Phone Guy wasn't the purple guy. If you visit this video and look at the comment section, you can see the arguments that fans had with each other on this theory. Then FNAF 4, which claimed to be the final chapter, was teased, had a trailer, and eventually came out. Immediately, almost everyone, including even MatPat, assumed that FNAF 4 took place during the Bite of 87. All the clues seem to point to it except for one, a TV show that plays in one of the video games that shows that the show was made in 1983. The fandom was so convinced that FNAF 4 took place in 1987 that Scott Cawthon himself had to say something in MatPat's comment section to let the fandom know that they were wrong. After this came a time period of such confusion that people began to question everything, and people are still asking questions from FNAF 4, just as some questions in FNAF 3 and FNAF 2 have still not been answered and solved. For one thing, the Purple Man actually makes a cameo in one of the minigames, which made people speculate his role in this whole story. People were now starting to question the idea that the Purple Man and Phone Guy were one and the same. The identity of the crying child was also a huge mystery. MatPat, realizing that the child wasn't the victim of the Bite of 87, speculated that the child was either the spirit of Golden Freddy or the puppet. Interestingly, though, he wasn't sure. Others speculated that the child was the son of the Purple Man. The question of who we play as also became a hot topic. Were we playing as the same crying child from the minigame cutscenes, or is someone different entirely? Was the Fredbear plush imaginary or possessed? Was it helping the child or hurting him? A YouTuber named Animatronic speculated that the Fredbear plush was actually aiming to harm the child. There was also the question of why there was a little girl's empty room with pieces of what looked like Mangle in them. What was in the box at the end? With so many theorists and players questioning everything, a new theory emerged. It was sparked by images that Scott Cawthon uploaded on one of his sites. This is known as the Dream Theory, the theory that all 4 games take place in the dream of the crying child. Upon being introduced, this theory gained massive popularity, with popular theorists like 8-Bit Gaming and MatPat supporting it. But eventually, flaws in the theory began to show up, with some fans like Animatronic not being satisfied by it. Eventually, in a video that was combined with a live stream, MatPat even brought this up himself. Eventually, the book The Silver Eyes, a novel, was released, and fans began to debate which details could pertain to the canon games. But when Sister Location was teased by Scott, theorists began to see connections between the book and the games. The book establishes that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza had 2 founders, Henry and William Afton. At the end of the book, Afton is revealed to be the child killer and villain of the story. The name Afton Robotics was found in the source code of Scott's website. MatPat made a video explaining this in great detail. The findings from the book greatly increased the anticipation for Sister Location. Later on, Sister Location was released, and while not causing as much controversy as FNAF 4 did, it certainly made the story of FNAF even more complex. The first question was when the game takes place. Was it a sequel to FNAF 3 or a prequel to one of the other games? The animatronics seemed very advanced to the point where they could communicate with the player as if they were people.
Shh, be still and quiet. You've been sleeping for quite a while. I think they noticed that you never left the building last night. The cameras were searching for you, but they couldn't find you.
There was also the question of who we play as in Sister Location. At the end of the game, the player is killed and scooped by Ennard, who then displays purple eyes at the last scene. Many assumed that this was Scott's way of telling us that we were playing as the killer. There's also the question of who was Ennard. It's odd that Circus Baby is never seen by the player, and in a death minigame, you can see that the original Circus Baby actually had blue eyes, not green eyes as this Circus Baby does. Scott later released DLC in the form of a custom night, which had canon 8-bit cutscenes. These cutscenes both cleared up and caused confusion. For starters, the last cutscene revealed that we played as Michael Afton, not William Afton from the books. He was sent by his father to put her back together, as he says, and he also mentions that he found it. After his speech, he mentions that he's going to find his father, and Springtrap appears for a brief period before it ends. Many fans began to theorize that Michael Afton was in fact the individual we play as in FNAF 1. They also theorized that Michael was Springtrap in FNAF 3 due to Springtrap appearing when he's done talking in a robotic sounding voice when he's repeating what he says one last time.
There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come find you.
Later on, however, MatPat made a video clarifying and explaining why Michael Afton was in fact likely not Springtrap. FNAF The Twisted Ones, a sequel to the Silver Eyes, came out. Upon reading it, MatPat made a video explaining the creepy look of the animatronics, a question that many theorists had but didn't have a good answer to. In the book, there are discs that change one's perception of something, which could explain why the player thought they saw such scary creatures. FNAF Pizza Simulator came out after, and was probably the least controversial game in the franchise. The story was pretty straightforward. Cassette Man, who was originally a partner of William Afton, wanted to finally put an end to the remaining animatronics once and for all. So he sets up a trap. And it works.
Into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach.
Thus FNAF and the main story ends. But then there are still a few unresolved questions. What were the secrets of the minigames? What names were hidden in the two mysterious graves? Who do we play as? At one point, Henry says that this job was not intended for you.
And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be.
Does this mean that we don't play as Michael Afton? At the time, we seemingly can't be sure. By deciphering codes in the FNAF Survival Logbook, MatPat and fans were able to figure out that one of the names on one of the graves, the child who was Golden Freddy, could be Cassidy. MatPat also theorized from the book that Michael Afton was in fact the crying child, as opposed to being the older bully brother. Initially, fans took Scott's word for it when he claimed that the FNAF Custom Night was non-canon. However, upon release, it became clear that it was connected to the main series games. The character we play as is in a never-ending night shift at a Freddy's Pizzeria. Theorists quickly guess that we play as William Afton, though others thought that we play as Michael Afton. But then the question of who put us in this strange world remains. Currently, due to a Golden Freddy Easter egg, many believe that Golden Freddy is the one keeping the player hostage. And so that's where we come to our current day and our current understanding of the FNAF lore. That is until it changes, as I'm sure it will. It's amazing to see how much the lore and our perception of it has changed. Frankly, it's been a very exciting and enjoyable experience for me, as well as others, which is why so many people are both interested and invested in the lore of this franchise. I do plan on making an analysis series for each of the games myself, and I may even try to give my own interpretation of the lore based on the clues in the game. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching.